She is the co-founder and CEO of CareCore, a clinical platform that empowers wellness creators and brands to offer doctor-supervised lab tests, prescriptions, and evidence-based health products.
You have to maintain the mind of a child always, in that you're asking why. That why kind of drove me down a path many doctors don't actually get to understand.
She's a Stanford-trained internist with oncology experience at Columbia. She shares practical longevity science to help people extend their health span.
I realized somewhere along the way that I couldn't be a doctor in today's system and do the things that I hope to do.
Usually how we like to kickstart these conversations, there's often just a moment that dictates a shift to sort of step away from the traditional healthcare system.
We're in a point of transition. We've gotten so good at detection that we don't actually know yet what to do with every single data point. I think the art part of medicine is really knowing what to do with incomplete knowledge. I always say start with figuring out what will kill you first.
Welcome to the Precision Medicine Made Simple podcast, where we simplify the complex world of precision medicine. We're here to explore how personalized healthcare can empower you to understand and improve your health to live a longer and healthier life. Join us as we break down the latest in medical science into actionable insights. Let's make precision medicine accessible and actionable for everyone. This episode is sponsored by Biography Health, where DNA-powered healthcare is designed just for you. Biography Health is a HIPAA-compliant precision medicine platform that equips providers with AI-driven recommendations powered by your genetics, health history, and clinical insights, all while keeping data private, secure, and independent from large EHR systems. If you're a provider ready to bring precision medicine into your practice, visit biographyhealth.com to learn more. Or if you're a patient who wants your doctor to explore this, point them our way. We'll help them bring personalized healthcare to life. As a reminder, this episode is for educational purposes only. This episode is in no way a replacement for professional health advice. Please consult with your professional primary care provider for medical advice. If at any point you feel that a topic discussed on our podcast was misrepresented, or if you have additional insights that could enhance our discussions, we wholeheartedly encourage you to reach out to us. Your feedback is invaluable in helping us improve and in ensuring our content remains both informative and reflective of the latest developments in precision medicine. Hey everyone, welcome to the Precision Medicine Made Simple podcast. I'm here joined with my co-host, Dr. Stanford. And for today's guest, she is the co-founder and CEO of CareCore, a clinical platform that empowers wellness creators and brands to offer doctor-supervised lab tests, prescriptions, and evidence-based health products. She is a Stanford-trained internist with oncology experience at Columbia. She also previously co-founded Curio, a venture-backed digital mental health platform. She's an Aspen Health Fellow and advisor to innovation hubs at Stanford and Cornell, along with select health and longevity startups through YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, her newsletter, The Long Game, and then even her own podcast, The Longevity Show. She shares practical longevity science to help people extend their health span. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Hillary Lin.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful opportunity to join you today. And thank you so much for that. Of course.
And it's an honor to have you onto the show. And usually how we like to kickstart these conversations in these episodes is when people step into the longevity space and within precision medicine, there's often just a moment that, or a culmination of moments that dictate a shift to sort of step away from the traditional healthcare system and sort of just the conventional route. And after doing some research, you mentioned you had some moral outrage at some points and just a lot of frustrations. I was wondering if you can take us back as to what sort of dictated that shift toward and curiosity then to see something else.
Thank you. I think it's this entire journey throughout my career has been extremely personal. I am perhaps, some would say unhealthily tied in my identity to my work. And many of us came into medicine because it was a calling. And for a long time, even from the beginning, I could see that my idealist sort of perspective of what medicine should be was not, in fact, reality. And I saw that even as early as medical school. I think the trouble was I didn't have a clue about how to still continue on my path towards, helping humanity with topics related to health and not be a doctor. And so I went through the process, which I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I've learned an incredible amount, and I'm incredibly happy to be a doctor. But I realized somewhere along the way that I couldn't be a doctor in today's system and do the things that I hope to do. And so the very moment was when, so I entered oncology. I was originally at Columbia for a moment, essentially, to be an oncologist. And I loved, the people I worked with. I loved the topic. And yet the way it came together was so heartbreaking because you have people who are facing the end of their life and they have to deal with an incredible amount of bureaucracy and just friction and roadblocks after another. And very, very well-meaning physicians and nurses cannot do anything to solve that, unfortunately. And so I saw it as imperative that I actually leave the system and try to figure out a different way to improve the entire space.
I mean, what's so fascinating about that is there is this curiosity also to then try and improve the space then. And that curiosity, after listening also to one of your other episodes, it was the rational biohackers mindset then. I mean, you were talking about just the taking into just different accounts of like all these different pieces of evidence to then come up with your own hypothesis and, the whole scientific method. Then I was wondering if you can dive more into like the curiosity then just to continue going down that path and leading you to where you are now.
I think it's so true that you have to maintain the mind of a child always, in that you're asking why. And for me, that moment where I left traditional medicine, I was asking, why do things have to be this way? And that why kind of drove me down a path many doctors don't actually get to understand, which is like, why does the healthcare ecosystem work the way it does? And it has to do with incentives and financial structures and so forth. And then I thought deeper, and it took me years actually to get to the point I am now to understand the why of how doctors even practice. So many doctors still practice in a sick care reactive manner and are adamantly doing so because that's what's been drilled into our minds from the very beginning of our training for, frankly, it's because that's the way health systems and the ecosystem makes money. And it's not actually for the benefit of human beings, because otherwise we'd focus so much more on wellness, prevention, all the things that I'm sure your listeners are very interested in. And so the curiosity was so important because it makes you push past a lot of deterrence. Because as you might imagine, I faced, and many of us in this longevity field faced, a lot of pushback and from people of authority. So our bosses, leadership in the healthcare ecosystem tell you you're wrong the entire time. And they'll argue with, lots of things. There'll be ploys trying to tell you that things are too expensive or irrational because there's no solution. And you have to really dig past that by continuously asking, well, why is it that way? And what if you, for example, let's just say, we don't measure many things because, the healthcare ecosystem can't pay for a solution. And so the question is, why test for something we can't do something about? But then think about, well, if we continue to never test for something, we will never think of solutions and never test for them and never come up with a cost-effective way to deal with a newfound health problem. And so that constant curiosity has been what's driven me past the common barriers that physicians everywhere face day to day.
I'm not going to lie, I can't imagine even now, and what really spoke to me on that episode specifically is trying to sift through a lot of the noise, and you called it like authority bias with like a lot of the influencers out there that could have some financial incentives, or they lack the scientific rigor to be able to promote some of these products then. And I'd love to hear also your take on this too, Dr. Stanford. Like how do both of you help sort of navigate the patients through some of all that noise that's out there to come to that personalized solution for these patients?
Yeah, I'll say for myself, a lot of experience dealing even over the decades, that I've been involved in healthcare. There's constant noise around any kind of change or advancement. And as Hillary laid out so well, invested stakeholders, so to speak, I've said this before, it's a $4 trillion economy, healthcare in the US. And there's people getting nice chunks of that, and of course, and it's not necessarily a nefarious kind of thing. It just, and I've used this example before, if if what you do is help, you're an interventional cardiologist and you're an interventional cardiology department, and your job is to open up clogged arteries, then if I were in charge of that department, for example, I would just get very good at that. I would try to be efficient, improve the patient experience, et cetera, to, as Hillary alluded to, make sure the money keeps flowing in. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, people need to get paid and whatnot. So the flaw is really not so much around, again, nefarious ploys per se, but they come across as ploys because they, are going to defend their ground and just emphasize what it is they're doing and the value of what they're doing, because that's where, their ability to pay their employees and deliver care comes from.
I love that. And just to, I love that because it shows so much understanding for like, we have gotten here not because of some, evil desire to like derive money. It's just, complicated systems end up a certain way due to incentive structures. And it reminds me too of the body itself. The human body and biology is so complicated. And each of our cells, it's like a little human almost. And sometimes you get, I talk about cancer like this sometimes. Sometimes you get a little cancer cell and all they want to do is grow. And, it's there's no evilness to it. It's just, they had the mind to, grow. And that is how complex systems everywhere happen. And in a way that might be detrimental to, the people within or, even the entire ecosystem together. So sometimes it takes a very disruptive either innovation or a regulation. Something very drastic has to happen when things have matured to this point.
Yeah, I mean, the system was set up around insurance reimbursement. Insurance reimbursement was purposefully and probably logically at the time defined around things that have actually happened, not the thing that may happen, may or may not happen in the future. But with the world we live in here in 2025, we have the ability to be predictive about what the future might hold. And so that in itself shifts the entire paradigm.
I love that because it leads to, the big mystery of what's going to happen with AI and whether we're going to be able to use it for good in healthcare. And I was just, watching a talk with, famous AI scientist, Andrej Karpathy, and he was talking about how 12 years ago in 2013, self-driving cars were already quite excellent. And yet we are here now a dozen years later, and they are, maybe edging a little bit closer to mainstream usage, but it's been way slower than we imagined. And we have incredibly powerful tools now that my co-founder, my partner, is an AI scientist. And what he understands is, the tools themselves are quite great. But once you mix them with today's reality, sometimes you get broken outcomes because the world demands certain things. So like we demand liability for medical decisions right now, and that necessitates a certain kind of structure.
Right.
And so there's a lot of complicated things, but you made me think of that because we are at a point in technological history where it is becoming way more possible to predict what will happen with health.
Well, I think that's also where wearables have always been around, but I feel like there's just been a lot of emphasis on being able to track the data and accurately, and then even incorporate it into healthcare strategies then, which, with my primary care provider, they would just look at it and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, things are good. But I'm curious how you two are also implementing that considering there's so many different data points, like as a patient, it almost becomes overwhelming to the case where it's like, okay, like I think I'm just going to go this direction, and then we'll see how it goes. But how do you manage all these different data points then, and using the technology of today to just continue to push forward and extend our health span?
Well, I think that we're in a point of
Hmm.
transition is the truth. You're right. We've gotten so good at detection that we don't actually know yet what to do with every single data point. So for most physicians, we're only human and we can synthesize it at a point in time. If you come in for a visit, for example, we can look at the patterns of what have happened over the last, say, month or 3 months. And then we can be like, okay, it seems like this or that is happening. However, I would love to see, and I think it's a near future. This is what we're building towards at CareCore too, is a way to understand more real time what's going on. And the trouble is right now we don't have all the facts. Like if you see something off with your HRVs dipping, you could potentially have early COVID, but it could also be you didn't sleep that well. So there's like a lot of reasons for markers to look a certain way. And so we don't have quite the exactitude that we should hope for. We just have a ton of data at the moment. But that being said, I still think it's better to start collecting that data, and we will see better and better interpretations and therefore things like or plans of what to do with the interpretations.
Yeah, and I think in the short term, all this data, it still can be useful in a Bayesian type way. That's really how AI is set up around evaluating data and the quality of it and the likelihood that it's impacting, et cetera, et cetera. And I think in the short term, you're going to have doctors like Dr. Lin and others that are able to look at the AI analysis and assuming the AI is not hallucinating and looking at the references, et cetera, and under the guise of the practice of medicine. So, every day we as doctors take in a myriad amount of information as it relates to a specific thing, like a urinary tract infection. You can have pain when you urinate. You can have fever. You can have white cells in your urine. You can have blood in your urine. There's a whole lot of different pieces of information coming your way that then you have to sort through in this Bayesian type analysis where you're, weighing the credibility of the data, the likelihood that it should be impacting your decision, and you make a decision, give antibiotics or don't give antibiotics. AI is a tool that helps us with that, maybe structure it. And the big difference is you're talking about all these, myriads amount of data points like from wearable technology that a human being can't really process all of that. And, but AI can spit out, specific analyses on these things. And again, under the practice of medicine, you can analyze this information, spin in some genetics. I know we'll be talking about that. And, you can make much smarter decisions about how to keep a patient healthier longer.
A quick note about that is you're reminding me, I'm constantly befuddled why we started calling it hallucination, because I think a lot of doctors might agree it's more like confabulation, what AIs do. Yeah. It's but that never caught on. I don't know why. But my point around that is that it's so magical because, it's creating these theoretical mechanisms to reason like why your data looks a certain way, which is pretty much what humans are trying to do. We're taking clues in a Sherlockian detective way, and we're trying to explain it. And so I think it's really interesting, but it also means that we never have the exact right answer for sure, because biology is simply so complicated.
And we never will.
Do you think we'll ever get to a point where AI is going to be replacing doctors, though? And this, I feel like this is going to be a pretty hot topic, a conversation just throughout the next few years. But I'd love to hear both of your takes on this.
Well, AI take the place of doctors. AI does a lot of things very, very well. I think for the foreseeable future and maybe selfishly anchored to the next 10 or 15 years of what it's going to look like, I think there will definitely be a role for the physician to interpret what the AI is saying. And, it could wind up like Google, where every time you go against the Google map, you get screwed, so it could be every time you come up with an answer different than the AI answer, it won't be as good. Who knows? But in the close horizon, so meaning 2, 3, 5 years, I think AI is going to be a terrific tool to do what you had suggested earlier, Taylor, which is to take way more information than any human being can handle and try to add some structure and consensus to it. And I think smart doctors know that you can't count 100% on anything, so you have to weigh that, in a way that is thoughtful and meets our current ethic of how we apply information to a care plan. I I think it's we can learn a lot from the AI. So I like that people prefer interacting with the AI more than doctors. If you heard that one, let us see that one. They're much more empathetic and et cetera, et cetera. So, it's going to unfold however it unfolds, and hopefully I'll put a positive spin on it. Hopefully it helps the best doctors help more people. And I think if you don't have more to offer than, an AI Google search or whatever, then, patients aren't going to, go to you, choose you, so to speak. So that's my take on it.
I love that. I agree with you. And so my answer is in agreement and stated just slightly differently, in that I think there will always be a place for doctors / healers. And the reason is humans love other humans. I often use the analogy that back in the day, we used to, get married for financial and necessity protection reasons and have children to work our farms. And we don't do that anymore. We couple up and have families for the joy of it. And even for areas like medicine, the knowledge piece may be more and more delegated to AI, which I think is great, because the truth is, I think AI is very good at knowledge, and it's going to get even better at being more and more accurate once we develop the proper systems to sort of harness the powers. The piece that will always be lacking is having a human actually care about you and to interpret and guide you through the knowledge itself. So if you have a cancer diagnosis, I also saw, AI is more empathic, but there's the chatbot being empathic is very different than someone sitting by you being empathic and explaining.
Unless it's an Android.
Yeah. Right. Maybe we'll get to that point. I could be totally wrong.
It could be like a Wookiee that really knows medicine, and people are going
to... who knows? We could have a very wild future. But I also think that you're right. For the time being, those of us who have grown up around mainly humans and not Android, I think it will be different in another generation or two. But we will probably always be seeking that human to help us along the way, even if AI has the correct facts and the knowledge. So, and another point that I want to bring out is I think if most doctors understood how AI could replace them, they would be quite happy. And it's because... because
it's all the stuff we don't like doing.
Exactly. We don't want to be, doing just mindless refills or answering random questions that have nothing to do with, understanding the healthcare, but is more about like, oh, when am I going to get my lab results back, or those sorts of things. So AI is going to be fantastic at that. And I think humans will be fantastic at being, I sometimes say, clinical philosophy, like helping a person understand what decision to make given the knowledge, or even like having a more tendency towards lifestyle interventions versus more, medical interventions that require medicines. And so I think that's the place that we will be able to rise up to. And I think that's a wonderful place to be as a doctor.
Well, one thing that really caught my ears was you mentioned the interpretation and guidance then even with patients. Like we have all of these resources at our disposal, and like we're able to just apply this in all different scenarios just to where we are right now.
But from an interpretation, I guess specifically more on the guidance part, me as a patient, I'm not going to lie, I procrastinate on some of the things that I know I'm supposed to be doing then. And I think it's almost sort of a fundamental challenge, sort of like a behavioral challenge then when it comes to longevity is like, oh, I can just push it off. Nothing's happened to me yet. I don't need to do anything until symptoms start to show then. Like, have you ever, like, I don't want to say like persuaded patients to be able to go through behavior changes, but like, what has been your, experience?
That's
Accountability.
It's accountability.
Yeah. Like in keeping like your patients accountable then. Is it just like over time and just a lot of different meetings from there and saying, hey, you got to watch out for this? Or what does that look like?
So I can I add a little angle to the question? Can you fold in what you would think of like a healthcare agent, as we're, as an AI driven tool for keeping a patient on track and not procrastinating doing their stuff?
My partner, the AI guy, he's like, I'm going to program this AI who's going to get me to go to the gym every day and eat the right foods and not snack. And then I'm sitting here thinking, that could theoretically be done, but unless they're literally like pulling you out of bed, it's,
they could have an Uber at the door to take you to the gym.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I think when this plays out to its natural conclusion, it's going to get that granular, but
it has to get very easy. And a real life example just from my life is I'm an okay cook, and I know roughly speaking how to eat well, but it's such a hassle. So finally I got a meal service, which is very custom to my needs, like, exact macros, that sort of a thing. And I'm just like, I have no excuse now. I literally have to eat it. My fridge is full of good tasting, healthy food. And that's what it took. So behavior change is the number one most important and hardest thing to achieve. And I don't know that anybody is really good at it, like doctors, AIs, or even coaches, even though that's, the full-time job of some people. That's a big mystery.
That reminds me of, that farmer's dog, the healthy dog.
Yeah.
We just wound up with a refrigerator and freezer full of it. So our dogs wouldn't eat it. So,
oh my gosh.
Yes.
You could probably safely eat that.
So you can scheme everything you want and make it as easy as you want. But at the end of the day, if the dog won't eat it, the dog won't eat it.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
3 different dogs. Huge freezer full of this stuff. It was crazy.
Well, the dog will find something else to eat is the problem.
Yeah.
They'll dig through your trash, or any humans where like if it's only like, okay, this or nothing, then you're like, all right. The only alternative is
up at you going, this isn't what I ordered. This isn't what we do.
Yeah.
We don't do mushy frozen food. Hey.
So adding just another layer on top of this question, I think even just like with patients, one thing that I feel like I'm even caught doing is like if I go through, let's say, all these different experiments and all of this different, let's say like genetic testing experiments, whatever, I'm afraid I'm just going to kind of get the same common knowledge that all other patients get: just sleep more, get a Mediterranean diet then, and exercise more, and that's all that I can really do. Would love to hear both of your perspectives and sort of objection as to like why they should be be more personalized and find more personalized solutions.
It's actually not just an AI problem. It's a usage problem or a prompting problem. I say prompting because, that makes it easier, but people are going down rabbit holes with incomplete knowledge. Let me use genomics as an example. So genomics are so important. I've had whole genome sequencing done. I think it's incredible. But anybody who's had that done, you'll get your report and realize that you diverge from the expectations like 90% of the time. It's not even like half, and is because there are things that happen epigenetically through your life, and it could be from when you were in the uterus all the way to things you're doing day to day that have changed the way your genome is being expressed. I'm very excited, by the way, about the world of proteomics, which is the next layer of figuring out what proteins are actually being expressed from the genome. But I don't want to get into like a scientific discussion. The point really is that everybody is so confident that we have the information we need to make exact predictions, but we really don't. So I think the art part of medicine is really knowing what to do with incomplete knowledge. And that is why doctors are better at prompting AI chats rather than patients most of the time, because through experience, we've seen a lot of examples where people don't fall into a textbook definition or things don't happen the way you would expect based on a particular test. And so we understand that, say you get 100 biomarkers tested, that's becoming so popular. And then you see like 10 things off the charts. And what do you do with that? So you have to understand, 5% of testing is going to be, out of order. That's just statistically baked into the test. And also some things, they're not that relevant, like the test center themselves. There's like a bar, an error bar that's allowable. And certain tests being imperfect are less bad than others. So all these little details are more baked into intuition today. And I'm not saying that AI won't be able to understand that fully, but certainly today, I think AI is more of a direct translator than a holistic interpreter.
In terms of the quality of the prompt and what we were talking about, one of the things that I'm starting to include on our, that I want to include on our intake form with Biography Health anyway, is something of a psychological profile. In other words, I would like for the AI to consider what kind of exercises has the patient done in the past? What kind of food did they like? What kind of diet, have they been able to do? So the thing is the AI can come up with all these things you should do, but there needs to be an intersection with what the patient might want to do or be willing to do. And so, a psychological assessment, I think, would go a long way toward improving compliance and implementation of AI and any kind of, even with medicine 2.0, so to speak, you would want to know what the patient is willing to do up front.
So speaking of willing to do then, and the way I guess we could, there's kind of a couple of different routes I want to take this, and it's a multi-layered question here. The willing to do usually comes with experiments, and you actually recently raved with, I think I would consider him probably like the most human experiments, like the most absolute human experience. Brian Johnson. There you go. I saw you listen to Brian Johnson, and I at the Don't Die summits, and then even partied with him and his mom, which I thought was like really funny. Not what I expected in any way, shape, or form. Wanted to hear how that talk went, and then also your take on what your take was on that talk, but then also in your own personal preference to like what experiments should people take from a longevity perspective if they are just starting out.
No, that was such a fun event. And to explain it, because I think Brian Johnson is absolutely polarizing, and he uses that to his benefit, and, good for him. But I have a interesting perspective maybe, which is that I assume most people start off as good and have good intentions. When they make mistakes, it's usually because they don't understand that they're saying something that could be misconstrued or may have negative externalities. And so I say that just to say, I don't agree with everything that Brian Johnson says or what effects it's taken. For example, just as a very small example, I know he believes in taking about 50 supplements or even more, I think, and he sells them in these packages, like these multivitamins. And I think that's actually misconstruing the value of each of those ingredients as being generally helpful for everybody. It's everybody is an N of one experiment. You need to, I'm the doctor who's giving or taking away multivitamins from my patients, and I'll test them and I'll add like very specific ones and retest, like change the doses, change the schedules. That's like the level of precision that is most helpful. And I think people who take a lot of like multivitamins end up overdosing on certain things, having side effects, problems, and so forth. So I think that's like a negative externality that, some of his work has perhaps cost, but I think he's generally well-meaning, having met him and understanding where he's coming from. And I think generally his work has brought a lot of attention to the field of longevity, which is incredibly valuable and important. Everybody's getting more excited. Like when I was there were more people excited about the lifestyle changes that he was talking about than, the biohackery stuff, like trying a peptide or gene therapy, which I think is a good thing. Like I think people should be re-energized about lifestyle changes. It's not new, but if he makes it seem like it's new, then cool, that's fine. And I think it's positive. And I think the fact that he does unusual things like bring his parents to the dance floor is, part of it. Yeah, part of it
Who's
is
a better
like
dancer, him or his mom? I'm thinking the mom maybe just.
I think so. Yeah. I want to hear his take on that. Brian Johnson, please comment. Are you or your mom the better dancer? But I think it's great. Like he's very community oriented, which is why he does these summits and he brings his family as much as he can into it. And that piece is one of the hardest things, I think, in today's society. Like we know all the pillars of longevity, like eating well, sleeping well, exercise, purpose, but actually community, I think, is the hardest one to achieve because it's not a systematic thing you can do. So I don't know. That's my take.
Yeah, well, I think what is new is, at least in the practice of medicine, that we underappreciated for so long and underemphasized for so long the impact of lifestyle things, like especially things like sleep and exercise. Diet was a little bit appreciated, but I don't know about. So what you did medical school at Stanford. So how much time and when did you graduate?
Oh gosh, about 15. Well, it depends on when. I was there for 11 years. So I last left Stanford about 7-8 years ago, but I did everything from undergrad to residency.
Oh, okay. So you did all of it. Okay. So, yeah.
To your point,
no,
we did not.
The simple question is, did they teach you any nutrition or exercise or the importance of sleep and et cetera?
Oh, I think there was an assumption that we understood it inherently and therefore they didn't need to spend time. But the reality is nobody does. Like the best thing Stanford did was to give us access to a gym. Which, it ended up being very little used because you know how busy everyone is in med school and residency. But that was a nod in the right direction. But absolutely, I don't recall having any specific lectures about nutrition or exercise at all.
No exercise for us. Maybe an afternoon of sleep and an afternoon of macro.
You learn a lot about sleep disorders. Like, sleep apnea and REM sleep disorders.
Oh, they didn't even get into that with us. So I graduated maybe 30 years ago, something like that. That was
No, it's fascinating. And I agree. It's unfortunately due to a lot of different things, like we mentioned before. But I will say, back to the whole, I think people come to where they are because of good intentions. At the time, our dean actually was asked, why don't we have more of a focus on primary care? Because frankly, Stanford doesn't or didn't when I was there. Some people magically ended up being primary care physicians anyways, but there was no focus on it and very few people went into it. And the dean said, that it
Which
wasn't.
dean was this? What was his?
It was Dean Pizzo, and he was great, but but I see his point, which is what I'm trying to frame it as. I don't think it was nefarious or anything like that. His point was that Stanford graduates specialists who are research experts in different fields, and primary care is not traditionally one of those types of fields. So yeah, we simply weren't a school that focused on that, and also, therefore, there wasn't as much focus on things like prevention or wellness and so forth. But from what I'm understanding, I don't think many medical schools had much of a focus on any of those topics.
And also, also assuming even mental health too wasn't really a big topic either then, because even now, I feel like that's kind of been on the horizon too, with not just like going to therapy, but then also these other lifestyle factors that can affect your mental health and everything else happening with your body.
And I have two things to say. One is in medical school, they had this really clever class. I loved it. It was called The Art of Medicine, and they got us together to do group activities. And essentially, it was group therapy. They tricked us into group therapy. So
we had they called it doctoring. So
oh yeah,
we had a doctoring curriculum. I think the interesting thing I would say about that, Taylor, is that back in the day, mental health was really considered a separate thing from, mental health was only addressed in terms of disorders and not so much in terms of wellness and the holistic nature and the impact on everything from cognitive decline to metabolic issues, et cetera. I know Dr. Lynn is deep into all that.
Yeah. I think mental health is so important, and I've tackled it from multiple angles. It's very personal to me, having been through my own mental health struggles and finding my own way. But also my prior venture, CareCore, was in the mental health space. We worked with everything from mental fitness, like education for keeping people mentally resilient, to psychedelic assisted therapy even, which is very considered edgy. And so I've seen it from that perspective, but also more and more, I think we're missing how much biology and physiology is involved with mental health. People just assume that mental health is all emotions, and it's all caused by, emotional traumas or emotional events that, result in anxiety, depression, and so forth. And there's a bit of that. Don't get me wrong. It's all interactive. But there's a large component of just biology. There's molecules involved. There's, the sensors, neurotransmitters, and our receptors getting altered in different ways. And to bring it home, really, for me, so I'm not the worst case of long COVID, but I have certainly suffered from long COVID 3 separate times. I'm still kind of getting over the most recent time. And that really brought home to me, like very personally, the reality of what happens when your body is altered and what that does to things like your mood, your sleep, your neurology. And so I think we need more attention turns towards that. It's not just about serotonin. Like, people are like, oh, going back to the SSRI, like the whole thesis. And it's not just about that. I think that's one tool that's been kind of overused over and over again for decades and decades. We need to get quite a bit more sophisticated about how can we change the underlying physiology for the betterment of mental health.
Yeah, the brain hates inflammation. We know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we dive into that a little bit more? Just because we actually had some other physicians that we've talked to that are also interested in some of just like the biological conditions then that can influence mental health, even from a genetic standpoint too, of what that looks like. Because for me, I obviously would thought it was just like, oh yeah, just tough it out or just deal with it emotionally, and that's really it. So I'd love to dive a little bit deeper on that.
What I think is underappreciated, and do you read much Harari, like Homo Deus or Next?
Yes, big fan.
So I'm not going to spend the time remaking his point, but I would recommend both those books highly. And they're for societal reasons, and just cultural, long-standing thousands of years. There's this need to separate. That we have this emotional self that's separate from the molecules and the complex systems that go into making things like thoughts and emotions and memories and all that kind of stuff. So, there's this bit of a cultural bias there, what I would say about that.
It's tempting because all of our legacy of beliefs, bases on the duality thesis of like, oh, mind or spirit, whatever you think of it, versus the body. That more and more, the more you know, the more you can't deny that it is inherently just tied to cells and how they act. And I hope I'm not speaking blasphemously for anybody out there, but it really is. Once you start understanding it and even feeling it, and you're like, wow, like actually, to give a clear example too, for those people who have experienced psychedelics, they make you question the veracity of many of your beliefs, because psychedelics are simply molecules that make your brain act in a different way. And your mind is a meaning-making machine. And so when certain things light up and you have more serotonin, for example, you're going to feel euphoria and love and all these things. And then when you have ego death, suddenly you're separate from yourself and you see the world as like particles coming together. It's very close to, or maybe identical to, a near-death experience as people have described. And so when you experience that and you know that this was a drug that is causing a physiological effect, then you realize that a lot of the stories we've been telling ourselves about beliefs are really the product of a brain trying to make sense of manifestations.
No, that was really cool. Thanks for that.
I don't know. It makes you question a lot, but I think it's, I like to view it in a positive way. I think it's our brains can make magic from very boring, just molecules out there. We're the most magical beings that have been in existence.
Yeah, and just understanding what's happening within the body, the so-called, and I buy this entirely, the gut-brain connection and, inflammation going on, and that crosses the blood-brain barrier and, the rest of it. I think that it's very important now and in the future that, we see these, complex systems acting together to, essentially generate mental health and mental wellness.
I am so glad you brought that up, because it is both so incredibly mysterious and yet so important.
Yeah. Speaking of AI, hopefully, and I think the current state of knowledge around gut inflammation and, different malabsorption syndromes and different microbiome derangements and the impact that has, but it's nothing compared to what it's going to be 5 years from now once AI can kind of sort through it a little bit. So I think that's going to be a huge application.
We need to sort out first what data to even collect, because, right now we're just stuck with stool samples, but also like what's going on like earlier before it, gets to the bottom of our intestine.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned like, malabsorption, for example. Or, that's going to be a treasure trove down the road.
So now speaking of start then, if a patient, and this is going to be twofold because we're going to be talking about the patients, then also the clinicians, then let's start with the patient though. If a patient does want to start along this sort of longevity journey, then there's so many different tests out there. There's so many different experiments that they can run on themselves. Like, what would you recommend then a patient to start to get a solid baseline of where they're at?
I always say start with figuring out what will kill you first.
You need to have the ability to predict where your areas of highest risk are.
Because it's infinite. As you could tell from our conversation so far, there's no such thing as a 100% comprehensive testing protocol, and it wouldn't even make sense for most people to do. So I know there's a lot of attempts to create that with like many blood tests, stool tests, MRIs, and things like that, but you're always going to have a gap. So you need to know the direction. And the very best way is, if you're not adopted and you know your family history, that's probably the very first clue. So look at what killed off your family members, if it was, natural causes, of course. And then after that, you can do some general screening that could give you some clues, like atherosclerotic disease. Luckily, we have now very good blood tests. So that can just be done with a blood test. There's some add-ons you could do, of course. And then cancer is more, I would think the family history is more valuable still. I know there's like a lot of these early detection tests coming out, but the frequency of when to do them, like how early to get started, there's a lot of questions still. So they're okay. I think explore at your own risk. And then of course we talk a lot about neurodegenerative disease. I think we are only in the beginnings of understanding that, because most of history, human history, people have died before neurodegenerative disease has become a really, really big problem for the majority of us. So I think we don't even fully understand that. And then there's like things that, of course, are contributing to multiple factors, like your metabolic health, your hormone health, and your immune health. So those are the areas that I would cover in a initial screening. And then from there, you can decide how deep to go in which direction.
Yeah. And I think the best point you're making is it's not a one size fits all. And I think anybody should be automatically skeptical of anyone that says everyone should do, in terms of the kind of approach that Hillary's talking about here, that everyone should do this and it's going to, be the difference maker and that's all you need to do. It's really needs to be individualized. I would add to what Hillary says, family history, but then the question becomes, what's the probability that you inherited that risk? And these kind of, screening, either blood or imaging, but, genetics can be informative there too. Again, it's not at all the end all. It's just another tool in the box. It's probably the next step.
And to use my own self as an example of something out of the box is I have a family history that I didn't frankly think a lot about, because I grew up completely separated from my dad's side of the family. So I just wasn't thinking about them.
Where did you grow up?
I was born in Taiwan, but I moved here to the US, very early in life when I was a kid. And I didn't live in
California or a different state?
on Long Island in New York.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. And then I knew a lot about my mom's side of the family, which, I could tell. I'm like, okay, lots of people get random different cancers and a lot of people have insomnia. So I knew that from my mom's side. And then from my dad's side, it was like I had heard about things, but it didn't become clear to me until a lot later in my adulthood. And it turns out that history, that family history, impacted me way earlier. So my father, my aunt, my grandfather, my grandmother, like all passed away due to atherosclerotic disease. My dad is alive still, but he had a heart transplant, so he's recovering.
Wow. Because of CAD, coronary artery disease?
Yes, he had triple vessel disease, and the long story short is they were trying to place a stent. And if you're going to ask me why they were trying to do that for triple vessel disease, is a universal health system. And so there are some disadvantages. So
the lower cost option.
Yeah. And unfortunately he had there was a perforation. It was an emergency. He was on ECMO for like a long time. And, he almost died so many times, but luckily a couple of years later, he ended up with a heart transplant, and he's recovering from that surgery still. But he's the lucky one. All the other relatives I mentioned, they passed away due to like aortic dissection or a sudden cardiac death or stroke. And it wasn't due to, like, when I first did like a genotyping screen that showed absolutely nothing regarding any sort of familial hyperlipidemia. And then even when I did the more in-depth whole genome sequencing, it clued me in for one small thing. It's like, you may have an unusual, something or another to do with your lipids.
Collagen or something?
It wasn't that clear. It was because, and my main point is that I think it's simply because I'm a minority, figure in terms of ethnicity in all these studies that have been done. And so there's just not a lot of data. And we probably do have some kind of familial hyperlipidemia syndrome, because even my cousins who are, young-ish like I am, we to give you a real number, my ApoB, when I tested it, it was in the 120s. And that was extremely high for somebody who was relatively healthy and, didn't really have much else going on. And so that is one of those areas where it took the lipid levels getting that high to detect it on a blood test, the gene testing, like all these other things that we would hope would predict such things weren't that helpful. It was really the family history plus like waiting for the level to get that high that finally got me started on the treatments. So
yeah, no, that's interesting about the perforation. It sounds like you have multiple of them with dissections, or
it was multiple people. So for my father, it was an intra-op sort of incident where he had a perforation. It was my aunt, his sister, who actually within the same year, she passed away from an aortic dissection. And that was just unexpected and sudden. And then, their father, my grandfather, passed away due to complications of a stroke, all actually within a month of my dad ending up in the hospital. So it was kind of like a dramatic year for me and our whole family. And it triggered me to get really in depth about my own my own health.
Yeah. And so that, the question is, how much of that risk did you inherit?
I expect a lot, it seems.
Well, what's possible these days is when you do whole genome sequencing is to look at the full range of the known ClinVar likely pathogenic variants and just look at it all.
I don't have a very strong opinion about, there's so many companies now. I went with one that was recommended by colleagues, New Amsterdam Genomics, which they were fantastic. They're very scientific in their approach and very thorough. And I think the reality is that we, going back to a prior point, is that we don't have complete information still. And so it's pretty good. It's pretty good to be able to do these tests. They're so expensive, but it's just one clue in a very complicated biological puzzle.
I agree with that. It's a crawl, walk, run situation. Tell us more about your particular enterprise and how you're with this new kind of comprehensive approach to precision medicine.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. It's really the culmination of all of my prior work and a lot of my predictions and beliefs about where the future of healthcare is going. So two big beliefs. One is that we are going to almost fully automate healthcare in the future, starting with the lower risk fields, of course, like and what I'm interested in is with longevity health optimization topics. And so that's what we're starting with. And we are creating an AI-enabled, but with a doctor in the loop always, platform. And the second big belief that I have is that healthcare is becoming more and more consumerized. And that is simply something we have to lean into without being left behind.
And that's the great news, actually, because that's the answer to the to the paradigm shift. Because the reactive sick care system, it's because of the insurance and all that. And so as patients have more agency about what and how they obtain their health care, that's what's going to move the needle. But keep going on that.
Yeah.
So
I think that's true. And I think the trick is you have to still be mindful of making sure the consumer is not being overly swayed by people trying to make a buck. So, yeah. And so
unfortunately, the longevity field is full of charlatans. And
yeah. It's so tricky. So, I mean, the way we're trying to bake it in is we start off with like a very personalized intake sort of system. And this will always continue to be better and better and improved. But that's our way of being like, okay, we're going to start there with you and make sure that you're appropriate for certain recommendations of products, which you can then purchase and, be on. But the problem is, of course, people are always going to hear about this or that new thing. I still maintain a small longevity practice myself. And I have patients coming to me all the time asking about different peptides or, whatever. And nothing against peptides. I think they are truly powerful, but they are not quite the magic pill people are asking for. There are unknown long-term effects. And, still people are trying to avoid the basics, like the lifestyle changes first and foremost. And so how do you bake that all into a platform? That's the challenge that we're trying to do. And the interesting thing that we're doing,
so
which
ultimately, is your plan to be more direct to consumer, it sounds like.
Yes, we're technically a B2B platform. And the provocative piece is that we are partnering with influencers primarily and some like wellness, like non-clinical or non-healthcare brands, essentially, who want to be able to access healthcare, essentially, as part of their services and products that they sell. And the way that we're doing that in a way that's both ethical and legal, of course, is that there are actually doctors and doctor-owned legal entities that are working in strategic partnership together. So the face of the brand is, it may be actually a doctor. A lot of our early partners are actually doctors who simply want to have like broader scale. But some may be like a health coach or a fitness instructor who it doesn't have an MD necessarily, but they want to be able to offer these medical clinical grade products and services to their audience.
Yeah, I have you heard of Monarch Athletic Clubs or any of these gyms that are?
Yeah.
Do you know Ryan?
I don't know him personally, but I've crossed paths with him multiple times.
We got to get him on the podcast too. I've met with him a couple of times, and of course I think it was Wall Street Journal or something, big article about people obtaining healthcare through their gyms, and good quality healthcare. Like it's Ryan Green is who we're talking about.
That's exactly, and that's what's happening with our gym partners. So I would say we roughly have maybe 2-3 buckets of partners that are signing up. One is, of course, the content creator. And those are people who are essentially offering education and promoting ideas and content that way. And then there's the gym/wellness clubs / PTs and trainers. And then we have a whole other group of people who are more like brands and so forth. And doctors can fit here or there in those, but we also have a lot of doctors and other clinicians.
It's almost like you're immediately addressing the pet peeve that you had with like some of these influencers that lack the scientific rigor and like lack the ability to promote, I guess, even just any of these products. Then it's almost like you're just empowering them to be able to make sure that they're promoting great products to the consumer itself.
It's and also it comes from my personal experience too. Like I started off as a traditional physician practicing traditional primary care. And a little while ago, not that long ago, I started making content for YouTube, and that really took off in an unexpected way. And that also made me realize that, if you are mindful and scientific, you can spread so much good, like what you're doing with your podcast too. And people love that. People actually want valuable, accurate information from people who know what they're talking about. So I think that's so important. And we should highlight and spotlight people who are doing that and give them more powers, essentially. And we don't partner with everyone. As part of the app process, there's this application. We have to make sure that we're not enabling pseudoscientific sales and things like that. But it is a method of if you can't beat them, join them kind of a feel. And also because I see the power of influencing through content and just how much the audience, individuals really crave that.
And I mean, you do such an excellent job on your podcast and like your YouTube shorts. I mean, it's so informational and also bite-sized too, to where I think anybody can really comprehend and understand it. And even with like, I downloaded your supplement guide too, and it was just very informational and resourceful. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And so with that said, and I know we're a little bit over time, we're going to be plugging in all of your different links into our show notes, but best way if they want to reach out to you and learn more from you, what's the best way to reach you?
Oh yeah, you can find me everywhere at Hillary Lynn MD, and I'm probably most interactive on LinkedIn. So if you want to find me there, That's a good way.
Where are you physically? Are you East Coast or West Coast?
I'm based in Manhattan, New York. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Okay. Really?
Yeah. Talk about a place where you have unique challenges for longevity type lifestyle.
Have you wandered over to Dr. Kamete at Kamete?
I am way overdue for a visit. So we've known each other for some time, and I had her on a panel recently in person for Tech Week. And so I know her. I just haven't visited her place. But we talked about doing a podcast over at her clinic in a couple of weeks. So look out for that one.
Well, I said hi. It's a great clinic. It's right on what they call
It's
that?
Central Park.
South Central Park, couple doors over from the New York Athletic Club. And
yeah.
She is a real pioneer in this space.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I feel very lucky to know many longevity physicians who have been doing it for, decades. Like I am relatively new to the space, and I know that. I'm trying to, I'm trying to catch up as much as I can and, going about it in a slightly different way. But I feel very lucky being in New York because I'm surrounded by so many doctors who have been practicing precision longevity medicine for decades.
So with Florence, she actually makes a pretty compelling case that she coined the term precision medicine.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So on the podcast, ask her how that came about.
Okay. That's a good one. I'll ask.
She's a really fun lady.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lin. Thank you so much, Dr. Sanford. We will see everybody next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Precision Medicine Made Simple podcast. If this episode inspired you to learn more about your health, please leave us a review and share the podcast with a friend. Your feedback helps spread the word about the power of precision medicine. Remember, taking action today can lead to a healthier tomorrow. See you next time.